Does God exist? It's a question humanity has been asking for as long as we've been conscious enough to ask questions at all. And almost every answer begins with the same assumption. God is something or someone, a being, a force, an intelligence, a creator sitting somewhere outside of all of this, watching, judging, or guiding. But what if the very premise is flawed? What if the moment we try to define God as something, we've already lost it? Because every something has a boundary, it has a shape, a form, a limit. And anything with a limit cannot be infinite. So if God is truly infinite, then God cannot be a thing. It cannot be something that you could point to, define, or reduce to a concept. So what is left then? Not something, but nothing. And I know that sounds strange because at first, when most people hear the word nothing, they imagine emptiness, meaninglessness, or nihilism. But that's not what this is pointing to at all. Because the nothing I'm pointing to is not the absence of everything, it is the source of everything. The mathematical term for nothing is zero. And zero is one of the strangest ideas humanity ever discovered when you really stop and think about it. Zero represents no thing, no quantity, and absence. And yet, without zero, mathematics as we know it would completely fall apart. You couldn't properly build a number system. You couldn't measure absence. You couldn't even fully define what something is because you would have nothing to contrast it against. You see, zero gives meaning and structure to all other numbers. It allows positive and negative to exist. It becomes this silent reference point from which everything else is defined. The same pattern exists in technology. Your phone, your computer, and the entire internet are built on two things, ones and zeros. One represents something. It's a signal, a presence. But zero represents nothing, no signal, an absence. And at first glance, zero seems less important because it's nothing. But remove zero and the entire system collapses. There is no structure, no differentiation, no information. So zero is not just necessary, it is foundational. It's this silent partner that makes everything else possible. This pattern doesn't just exist in math or technology. It exists everywhere. Think about a cup. We think the cup itself is the important part, but what actually makes the cup useful is not the material. It's the empty space inside of it. Think about music. What makes music beautiful is not just the notes, it's the silence between them. So remove the silence and all you have is incessant noise. You see, we rarely notice nothing because we're too focused on the things that are appearing within it. But emptiness is everywhere. Everything you can see, touch, and experience, including your own body, is almost entirely empty space. If you zoom into an atom, you're going to find a tiny nucleus at the center with electrons moving around it. But between them is almost nothing. If an atom were the size of a football stadium, the nucleus would be like a tiny grain of sand at the center, while everything else would be empty space. So the solid world you think you're living in, your hands, your body, the ground beneath your feet, it's not nearly as solid as it seems. It's structured, it's organized, and it's patterned, but fundamentally it is arising out of nothing. Which means this nothing that we're talking about is not distant, it's not rare, it's not somewhere else out there. It's everywhere, and it's what everything exists within. This is where the conversation becomes personal, because the same thing is true for you. Thoughts come and go, emotions, they rise and fall. Identities are formed and eventually dissolve. But what is it that all of this is happening within? What is it that is aware of your thoughts? What is it that notices your emotions? Not the thoughts themselves, not the emotions themselves, but the space in which they appear. That space has no shape, no form, and no boundary. You can't see it because everything you see is appearing inside of it. You can't grasp it because anything you try to grasp is already within it. It is no thing. And yet without it, there would be nothing. So when we say God, what if we are not talking about a being somewhere in the sky, but the very field of nothingness that allows everything to exist? Not a separate thing within reality, but the context for reality itself. The mind struggles with this because the mind only understands things. It wants to define and categorize and conceptualize everything. But the moment it tries to grasp this, it disappears because it was never a thing to begin with. You don't find God in the way you find objects. You notice what has always been there: the silence, the space, the emptiness, the awareness. Empty like space, empty like potential, empty like the blank canvas that makes creation possible. And if you follow this realization deeply enough, something profound begins shifting. Because if God is not separate from you, but the very space in which your entire experience is unfolding, then what you are is not just the character within the story. You are also the space the story is happening within. That changes everything, because suddenly you are not limited to your thoughts. You're not confined to your emotions. You're not defined by your past, your fears, or even the body that you temporarily identify with. All of those things are appearing within you. Not the human version of you, but the deeper you, the awareness, the consciousness, the soul. The part of you with no edge, no boundary, and no form. The invisible presence that is no thing, yet contains everything. This is the great paradox. The thing humanity has been searching for as something can only be recognized when we stop searching for it as a thing altogether. When we stop trying to define it, control it, or conceptualize it, and instead begin to notice the silence and emptiness that allow everything to exist. This is not a new idea. Humanity has been pointing toward this truth for thousands of years through different languages, religions, and traditions. When Jesus said, "The kingdom of God is within you," I and my Father are one, he was dissolving the distance entirely. He was pointing not toward a distant God outside of you, but something infinitely closer. The Chinese prophet Lao Tzu said, "We shape clay into a pot," but it is the emptiness inside that holds whatever we want. The spiritual teacher Yogananda described this same truth another way when he said, "God's presence is our omnipresence." The ancient Upanishad said, "Tatvamasi," you are that. Again and again throughout history, mystics and spiritual teachers kept pointing toward the same realization from different angles. So maybe the question was never really, does God exist? Because eventually the conclusion becomes unavoidable. Not that God exists somewhere outside of you, but that existence itself is the expression of God. That divinity runs through everything, including you. Maybe the better question is this: can you recognize what has always been here? Not as a belief, not as an idea, but as a direct experience. Because when that recognition happens, it changes the way that you see everything. Life is no longer something happening to you. It becomes something happening within you, as you. So when you search for God in the nothing, you will find the source of everything. Thanks for watching this video today. If you get value from my content, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. I don't want you to miss future conversations about awareness and emotional freedom and enlightenment. And if you really want to go deeper into the work, head over to my website at keithcrossley.com. I've got additional teachings and resources and coaching options, all designed to help you attain the highest levels of mental and emotional freedom. I really appreciate you being here, and I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video.